What is up, you guys? Welcome back to day 3 of my WSOP main event run. This is my first ever WSOP. We made it to day 3 and there's 3,500 players left. I have 157k in my stack, which is around 60 or 70 big blinds, and 1507 make the money, which is a $5,000 profit. It's a 15k min cash. Wish us some luck. There's a lot of big names in the field like Sergio Aguero, Bill Klein, Botez, tons of people. I'm one of them, and we're gonna try to get down to the money today. Let's see how it goes. Let's go. If you haven't seen the previous video documenting days 1 and 2, go watch that first. I promise it's worth the view. But for now, we pick up the action on day 3 with over 70% of the field already busted. Did I mention it was a record-setting event with over 10,000 entrants? Word on the street is if we make it to the end of the day, we're in the money, and I definitely have my eyes set on that. Alright, first hand, I look down at Ace-7 of clubs from the low jack. I open it up to 5.5k, which is just over a min raise. For those of you guys that are not too familiar with tournaments, there's a completely different strategy and you have to put in the time to study it. But basically, a min raise is very chic. A lot of people are doing it. I know in cash games you go for a 3 to 4x raise. Well, here, later on in the tournaments, you want to go for a 2 to 2.2x raise. I decided to make it 5.5k, and the cutoff and the big blind both call, leading us to a decent flop, which gives me an open-ended straight draw and the backdoor nut flush draw, and the action checks over to me. Out of position against two opponents that could easily have a hand like 9-8, 8-6, or any of the possible sets, I decide to start with a check and not get blown off my equity. The action checks around, bringing in the turn, which gives me the straight, bang, the 5 of hearts. The big blind checks it over to me, and now we're in an interesting spot. I said bang, but it's a double-edged sword because the straight brought in the front door heart draw, and I don't really want to get raised in this spot. It definitely feels weird to check once again, but you can let me know down in the comments. I actually decided to check here, going for a check call, and then trying to put more money in on the river. That's what I decided to do, and the action checks around again. The cutoff does not put more money in. So at this point, I don't think the big blind or cutoff both have a flush, which means I should have the best hand, and the 10 of spades peels off on the river. I really don't think anyone has a hand like Jack-7. I mean, it's definitely possible, but I'm definitely discrediting it a good amount. So when the big blind checks it over to me for a third time, I definitely have to get value now. If I get raised, I probably can just put in the call, but if I would have got raised on the turn, it sets up a much larger bet on the river and a harder decision. So into the 20k pot comes a bet from me of 8,000 chips. Probably could have sized up a little bit, but I make it 8k, and the cutoff does not waste much time before putting in the call. When he just calls here, I'm expecting him to have some sort of hand like Ace-10, maybe a 2 pair like 9-10 or 9-8. Either way, I turn over my hand and he mucks his, which means we are taking in that nice size pot. Every chip matters, especially early on in day 3. That's definitely indicative here in this next hand where I look down at 9-4 of clubs from the big blind. There is a raise from the +1 position to 5.5k. It seems that all the other opponents are agreeing that the raise size here at this blind level is 5.5. The hijack just puts in the call. Not going to see a lot of 3-betting from him. And I put in the call as well from the big blind. You might think this is a little bit loose, but if I'm in the big blind, I have to have a wide calling range. I think 9-4 suited definitely makes the cut, and we're off to a flop, which gives me 2 pair. Ace-9-4, bang! We flop 2 pair with 2 diamonds out there. Interesting board. I start with a check. Not going to be leading here. I think I could have pocket 4s, but the opponents in +1 and hijack are going to have all of the aces and pocket 9s. So when I check, the +1 checks, and the action's over to the hijack. It checks through, bringing in the 5 of hearts on the turn. Really shouldn't change anything. If I want to put more money in, I could either lead or I could check raise. I decided to do option B and start with the check once again. The action's over to the hijack, who takes the bait and bets out for 7,000 chips. I'm next to act, and I don't want it to get checked through on the river. If I just put in the 7k call here on the turn instead of check raising, he could get a little bit leery on the river and just check it behind. Additionally, if he has a hand like King-5 of diamonds, King-Queen of diamonds, something like that, I want to get value now before another diamond comes in. So I decided to check raise it up to 18,000 chips. The +1 couldn't get out of there fast enough. The action's back over to the hijack. He thinks about it for a little while, but my line looks too strong to him. He finds the fold, and just like that, we are 2 for 2 on day 3. running up a nice little chip stack. All right, we made it through the first break. I have around 160K chips. I looked down at ace king offsuit from under the gun and raised it up to 6.5K, and only the small blind decides to put in the call. So just like that, we are heads up in position to a flop, which comes much better for the small blind than myself. 7-6-5 with 2 diamonds, and he checks it over to me. Given the fact I don't even have a diamond in my hand to go along with it, I decide wisely to check. The turn's an interesting one. It comes the 8 of diamonds, brings in the front door diamond draw, and additionally it puts a 4-liner to any 9 or 4 being a straight. Small blind checks it over to me once again. Now here I think my decision is interesting, but for the most part it's pretty simple. I just should check. Don't want to get raised here with my ace high. At the same time though, my under the gun range is going to have a lot of strong ace and king of diamonds in it. It's unfortunate at this moment I don't have one of those combinations, but even though if you don't have it in your hand in the moment, that doesn't mean your range can't be comprised with those strong cards. That being said, I don't want to get blown off of this. If I had the ace of diamonds and he raises, I could call, but if I had the king of diamonds, it's a little bit of a different story. So for that reason, I check behind, see what the river card brings in. If it's another diamond, I can probably blast him off a 1-pair type of hand, because he'll have to know that I have the strong diamonds in my range. Either way, the river does not come that. Instead, it comes the 9 of spades. The small blind takes yet another passive line and checks it over to me for a 3rd time. Could we check behind here and chop the pot? Yes. Is there a chance that we're beating this hand? I don't really think so. Any 4 or 10, I feel like I would have heard of by now. If he had a flush, I also think he would have made that known to me at this point. So I think his most likely holdings are 1 or 2 pair that got counterfeit on the river, now that we're both chopping with a straight. That being said, I think I like going for a bet here and trying to get him off a chop. I decide to bet out for 21,000 chips. It's a large size bet, and it has to be in order for him to get off of his hand. He thinks about it for a while, and I mean a while, you guys. He is putting me to the test, looking over at me, looking at my neck, looking at my hands. He's trying to get a read to see if I'm full of it, which of course I am. I just have ace king off, which is just playing the board. In the end though, he gives us the good news by folding his cards. We are taking in that 19K pot, which we definitely needed. And later on in a future break, we talked about this hand. I didn't tell him what I had, but he let me know that he should have 3-bet me preflop because he had ace king. Wow, we got him off the chop there with the exact same hand. And just like that, 3 for 3 on the night. All right, a few more hours go by before we pick up this next hand. Yes, this day so far was pretty brutal. It's already 6 p.m. Our chip stack is at 134K because when the blinds come around, it eats you up, and yeah, you gotta just fight to stay alive. We've made it this far though. We look down at ace-5 offsuit from the big blind. There's a raise from the hijack to 7K. Action's on me, and I said before, you have to have a pretty wide calling range out of the big blind. I think ace-5 off, flopping some wheels, some 2 pairs and top pair definitely constitutes a call. I put in the call. Just like that, we're off to a flop, which comes jack 8-4 rainbow. The flop goes check, check, giving me a pair on the turn, and I start with a check once again. I think from time to time, he will mix in some checks with his pocket 8s, pocket 4s, ace jack, king jack, although not at a large frequency, so we can discount it, but not fully eliminate it. And for that reason, I start with a check on the turn once again. Surprisingly, now he checks behind, and I don't think he's going to have many types of hands. Don't really think he's going to have too many flush draws anymore. Don't really think he has too many strong jacks, and I don't think he has 2 pair or sets. So at this point, he really only has weak 1 pairs like ace-4, pocket 6s, pocket 7s, stuff like that. And when he checks behind, it brings in the river, which comes the king of diamonds. Should be a card that favors his range over mine, so I check it once again. Don't really love that card because you could easily have hands like ace-king, king-queen, king-10, stuff like that. At the same time though, he's a capable opponent and he knows this. He bets out for 5K, which is a small bet. Could raise here as a bluff, trying to get him to fold a jack. But like I said earlier in my calculations, I don't really expect him to have too many of those. So it's either a bluff here with a hand like ace-queen, ace-10, ace-9, something like that. Or it's a hand like king-queen, king-10, ace-king. Either way though, it's 5K. I have a pair which beats a lot of his bluffs, so I put in the call. And unfortunately for us, he gives us the bad news when he turns over king-queen offsuit. So yeah, I'm not too stoked with that. Maybe if I would have bet the turn, he could have folded, but I don't really think it was a spot for me to do so with my pair of fives. King Queen offsuit is going to take down this 28.5k pot, and that one definitely hurts. We needed those chips pretty badly, but we're going to rebuild in this next hand, where I look down at a much better hand, Ace Queen offsuit from the low jack. +1 raises it up to 6.5k, and I'm in the low jack with Ace Queen off. Could be calling here a small portion of the time. I also could be 3-betting, and that's what I decided to do. I make it 16k chips, and the action's back over the +1. After a little bit of thinking, he decides just to put in the call, leading us heads up to a flop, which comes about as good as it gets. Queen 3 deuce with 2 hearts, and he wisely checks it over to me. It's a 40k chip pot. Could I ever be checking behind for deception and pot control? I don't really think so. If he has pocket 3s or pocket deuces, he's going to let me know on the turn or river. So I decided just to put more money in case he has a hand like 10-9 of hearts, king jack of hearts, stuff like that. Got to be putting more money in here when I'm ahead. Can't get too fancy in any tournaments, let alone the main event. That's not my style. I bet out for 15k, putting out one of those elusive 25k chips and verbalizing it to the dealer. When it comes back around to the +1 position, he does fold, so we did have the best hand. Could have trapped them there on the flop with a check. But yeah, definitely not giving anyone a cheap price to catch up on the turn or river. Just going to take this one down here on the flop and 40k chips coming into my stack. Those are soldiers we are going to utilize in the next few hands. All right, we made it to the second break of the day. The blinds have now gone up to 2K, 4K, 4K. We look down at another premium from under the gun, Ace King offsuit. And I start with a min raise to 8k chips. Only the big blind decides to put in the call. Remember, he's going to have a wide range. So when we see this flop, which comes 5-4-3 with 2 spades, definitely going to favor him over me. He checks, and even though I have the ace of spades, which is a key card, I decide to check behind, bringing in a good card for my range now, the jack of clubs. And now the big blind checks it over for a second time. If he would have let out here on the turn, I think we could have put him on a hand like pocket 5s, pocket 4s, maybe even 5-3, 4-3, 5-4. But when he checks twice, he probably doesn't have any of those hands. So I think it's kind of a green light for me to go for a bet, representing all the strong jack X in my range. That's exactly what I decided to do in the moment. I fire out for 6.5k, and just like that, we're going to take it down. It'd be pretty cool if he would have showed his cards and we could have seen a hand like 7-4, 7-5, something like that, and just gotten away with one here. But either way, taking down another pot, pretty great. We needed those blinds back in our stack. All right, the blinds are eating us up here. It's now 8:07 p.m. We've been playing for around 8 hours so far today, and this is the first time we've seen an amazing pocket pair, the best one ever created. Pocket aces, the sharp tops, weapons of mass destruction, American Airlines, what do you guys call them? Let me know down in the comments. Maybe I'll utilize some of those names in the future. I raise it up to 9k from the cutoff, which is around 2.2x, and the small blind decides to put in the call. Should have a pretty wide range. We look down at our cards once again. It's beautiful. It's been 8 hours since we've last seen them, and we get a pretty good flop, which comes Queen 8-3 rainbow. The small blind checks it over to me for the first time. Now a check here makes a lot of sense from the small blind. He's going to be doing this with Queen 8, pocket 8s, pocket 3s, all that good stuff. At the same time though, he could have some random Queen X garbage like Queen 4, Queen 5 suited, stuff like that. So I think I need to go for a bet. There's 26k out there, and I decide on a sizing of 12,000 chips. Love this sizing for me. It's big enough where it folds out hands like 7-6 of clubs, 5-4 of hearts, stuff like that that has equity, but if we get him to fold, it's still a pretty good win. And it's not small enough where he's just going to call with a bunch of that garbage, so it definitely keeps him on his toes, and he puts in the call from the small blind, which is interesting here. Could have a lot of combinations of some random stuff, some Queen X, some 8X, and the 10 of diamonds peels off on the river, and just like that, we're playing a 50k chip pot. I have around 90k in my stack, so just under a 2-to-1 stack to pot ratio. Small blind checks it over to me for a second time. Now what does this 10 of diamonds bring in? Well, immediately brings in hands like Jack 9 suited and offsuit. It also could bring in hands like Queen 10 off and Queen 10 suited. Both those hands make a lot of sense. Also, if he has some random hand like 8-7, 8-6, stuff like that, it's probably not going to call a bet here on the turn. I decided to get sneaky and check behind here for pot control, but also for deception, thinking that I'm only going to get one more street of value versus any of those hands that I just mentioned. Unless, of course, he has a set or the 2 pair in which he might just raise it on the turn, put me in a tough spot. So for all those reasons I mentioned above, I check it behind and we see a very safe 5 of clubs on the river. Now the question is, when the small blind checks it over to me, how large do we go? When we check the turn, it makes it very hard for him to put us on kings and aces. Ace queen offsuit might be a tough sell, so for that reason, I want to go large here and put him in a weird spot. There's 50K in the middle, and I decide to go around 2/3 the size of the pot. I bet out for 38,000 chips. Another important piece of information is I recently saw the small blind make a very light call against another opponent on the table. He didn't have many chips in his stack as well, so that call was extremely valuable information, knowing that he's willing to put money in when he has a read. That also factored into my check behind on the turn. Really wanted to confuse him and not be able to put him on pocket aces. If he thinks I'm a recreational, I'll never play aces like that. But yeah, he's from Europe and he probably has never seen my vlog, so I'm hoping he thinks I'm a rec here. I'm just trying to get him off a weak queen or an 8 or something like that. And yeah, if he puts in the money, we'll turn over the goods and scoop in a large pot, which will be much needed for us. But when push came to shove here, the small blind decided not to go with his read. He went into the tank for a while, but ultimately he did in fact fold, which although we're scooping in a 50K pot, which is great news, I really would have loved to see a call there. And that would have taken us up nearly to 200K chips. Either way though, scooping in another pot, definitely not the worst news in the world. All right, we're going to battle here with ace-9 of diamonds from the +1, and I raise it up to 8K. It's a min raise, and only the big blind puts in the call, leading us off heads up to a flop, which comes jack 7-7 with 1 diamond. The villain in the big blind checks it over to me, and I decide not to go for a c-bet. Instead, I check behind, bringing in another great card for my range. It comes the king of hearts. When the big blind checks it over to me for a second time, he could be doing this with a 7, but I think more often than not, he's just going to bet out his 7s on the flop and definitely on the turn when checked behind. So for that reason, when he checks it twice over to me, I'm going to represent all the strong kings in my range. I know I have ace high here, but I got to represent king 10, king queen, ace king, all that good stuff. Try to get him to fold a hand like 4s, 5s, 6s. That would be a huge win. 8K is the price of poker, good sir. And I said good sir because he listens to me and folds his cards. It's always great when you take down a pot with ace high, and just like that, we are moving along into the third break of the day. We are still very healthy in this tournament. All right, here's the deal. We're on dinner break, coming back to 27 big blinds. The big blind is now 5K, and there are 500 people in between us and a min cash. That'd be pretty sweet in my first main event, but we're not going to play just for the min cash. If there's spots to take, we're going to chip EV. We're going to put the money in the middle, but still 500 people between us and the min cash. We're probably playing till 2 a.m. tonight. It's going to be a grind. My table sucks right now, but let's get it. Let's go. You can hear the excitement in my voice. That voice crack was definitely not planned, and I'm definitely stoked to be getting 500 away from the money. This next hand, we look down at ace-6 of spades from the big blind. The cutoff raises up to 11K, which is just over a min raise, and I decide to put in the call with my suited ace from the blinds. This call, though, represents around 10% of my stack, so it's definitely an important pot to win. I toss in 1 green chip, indicating a call. Just like that, we are going heads up to a flop. Flop comes decent, comes 10-6-5 with 1 spade. Of course, we have the backdoor spade flush draw. We have the middle pair. Can't be going anywhere to a c-bet, so when I start with a check, he goes for that bet, and I'm not going anywhere. I put in the call for 5K. It's very small, so I definitely like that. I'm still ahead of any of his hands like king, queen, king, jack, ace, queen, stuff like that. If I was a little bit deeper, I could consider going for a raise, just trying to get those to fold right away. But given the fact I only have around 100K left in my stack, I decided just to put in the call, leading us off to the turn, which comes a 7 of clubs. Definitely a better card for my big blind range than his cutoff opening range. I start with a check, and he knows this and checks behind. The reasoning for him checking behind is very smart. If he goes for a bet here and I raise, I don't necessarily have to have 2 pair or a set, or even a straight, but I definitely could have it in my range. And so he needs to know this and check behind, even with hands like jacks and queens in this spot. I think betting them there at 100% frequency would be a huge mistake. He wisely checks behind, and just like that, we are off to the river, which gives me 2 pair. Comes the ace of clubs. It's a card that definitely connects better with him than me. For instance, he would bet the flop and check behind on the turn with a hand like ace queen, ace king, ace jack. So I don't really think I should be leading out here. That being said, I'm also going to have a lot of sets in 2 pairs, given the fact he checked behind on the turn, not giving me a chance to raise those. So I could have a leading range here on the river. I was in a weird spot here and I ultimately did not know what to do. Do I lead my 2 pair or do I check it over to him knowing it's a better card for him? and risk getting it checked behind. At the end of the day, I thought my lead here was a little bit too strong, and I decided to check it over to the cutoff, thinking he would bet here with any of his strong aces, trying to get me to call with a hand like 10-9, 10 queen, 10 jack, maybe even with a hand like 6-4 or 5-4, who knows. I check it over to him, and when he checks behind, that is the white flag. We did not want to see it. I know I'm good. I say I win and turn over my cards. And yeah, we're going to scoop in that pot, but he let me know after the hand that he had me beat before the river. Not really too sure what he had then. Maybe a hand like pocket 9s or pocket 8s. But I think those might have bet there. So let me know down in the comments what you think he meant by that. When he said he had me beat before the river, what kind of hand did he have? Queen 10, king 10, 10-9, something like that. Who knows? Either way, one thing I know is I'm scooping in that pot, and there's no debate about that. All right, the action folds around to us in the small blind, which means we have to raise at a large frequency. Just so happens I look down at a beautiful hand, king 8 of diamonds from the small blind. I pop it up to 16K, and he puts in the call. The only spot at the table you should really deviate from the 2 to 2.2 size min raise is the small blind. You definitely have to go larger. Given the fact the big blind is going to call a large portion of hands, I decided to go 16K here, and he puts in the call, leading us off to the flop, which comes ace, queen, 9 with 2 diamonds. We don't immediately connect with the board, but we do have the front door nut flush draw. Look at that. What a beautiful flop for our hand. We need this pot. We are only around 100K in my stack, so this represents a large portion of it. I decided to bet out for 15K. I think betting and checking here both have a lot of merit, and he immediately folds his cards, so I'm going to win with my king high. So even though it didn't get past the flop here, still pretty great raking in another pot. Although I did have a feeling that the diamond was definitely coming in on the turn or river, so I wish he would have put in the call there and I could have gone blasto on the turn, just ripping it in his face, getting maximum fold equity, or just drilling the diamond and doubling up.
Let me see the bag.
I mean, it's pretzels. Of course it's got...
Yeah, but it had whole wheat in it.
But I don't even know how she tasted it. She spit it out so fast. I don't think she liked it. Check.
Thank you.
She's busy.
He hasn't acted. He hasn't acted.
Yeah, this one very good.
Very good, very good.
After a few rounds of card death, my chip stack is down to around 90,000 chips, which is definitely not great at this blind level. You can see it's pain when you see the two other big stacks at the table betting hundreds of thousands of chips. Those purple lavenders over there on the button are 100K each. Each one of those chips represents more than my chip stack, which is painful, and equally painful is the floor here at the WSOP decides to call day 3 before we reach the money. So we don't know if we're in the money just yet. Instead, we're gonna have to come back for day 4 tomorrow. Still pretty cool though. I can say that I reached a day 4, but my chip stack is a little bit embarrassing. Let's bring it to real time and see my emotions.
All right, so here's the deal. We are 11 off the money, and I don't want to play it out tonight, which means we're coming back tomorrow for day 4. First ever WSOP, first ever day 4. We're not in the money yet. We are on life support. We're coming back to 8K big blinds, and I think we have 71K. There'll be a lot of tanking tomorrow. I'm not going to participate. If I have a good spot, I'm going to rip it all in. Day 4! Day 4! Day 4! Oh! Let's go!
Let's go, good luck.
Nice to see you. And yeah, we're gonna rip it in if we get a good hand, but day 4 is coming right up. Stay tuned, let's go.
Roll card with the jack, aces and jacks. We have an elimination.
Let's go!
You're on the money!
After an insanely long and dramatic TV-worthy bubble, eventually it burst, meaning we have cashed in the biggest buy-in ever, let alone the main event, my first ever one at that. 10K buy-in, 15K locked up, a $5,000 profit. And just like that, we find ourselves with 51K chips left. And the blinds are intense, which means we have minimal big blinds. At this point, I was playing for a min cash. A double up meant nothing, a few hands from the money. Meanwhile, a 5K min cash meant a lot, so I decided to fold out a bunch of mediocre hands in order to get into this spot. We are in the money, and hand immediately after the bubble bursting, I find myself under the gun, and I'm gonna get my 51K chip stack in there. Let's play it out for the vlog.
Okay, sweat for the vlog. Sweat for the vlog.
Nice little bird.
Oh, you got me in trouble.
Okay.
Hey, but we have life.
3 players, 2 all in. Good luck, everybody.
Give it Zach. Do it slow, Tim. Still alive.
Oh, it's over.
GG's.
Game, guys.
Okay, guys. Nice hand, nice hand, nice hand. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody.
All right, I'm pale as a ghost because I've been inside for the last 5 days for 12 hours each day, but sad to say that we'd min-cashed the main event. I got it in. You saw the hand. It was just not to be, but I'm pretty stoked. My first ever main event. Made it to day 4. Huge accomplishment and first ever cash in the main event. 5K profit, 180 bucks an hour over the last 4-ish days. Can't be disappointed with that. I want to thank everyone for watching my videos. Without you guys, I wouldn't have the courage or funds to enter the main event all on my own dime. 10K was all me, no stake. Didn't sell any action. I have 1% of Frankie from Next Gen who's still in, but we didn't swap, so I have 100% of this min cash, which feels pretty nice. And the vlog continues to be determined if I make one more video here from Vegas, one more cash game to let you guys enjoy some of the WSOP festivities. But as for now, I'm gonna get some much needed rest. Been running on like 5 hours of sleep each night. And these videos take a while to make as well. Appreciate all the support. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.